I prefer petting cats and dogs myself, but hey, you pet the shark, count your fingers when you're done. On the right-hand side here is a building that serves as our shopping mall. This is called Building Number 1 because it was the first permanent building built here by the United States Navy as part of the Navy base. It originally served as a sail off and then later as a coaling station for those Navy vessels. On my right is my favorite building on the island. This big pile of red bricks kind of resembling a gigantic Pizza Hut. That was called the Customs House when it first opened in 1890. It was the site adhering into the sinking of the USS Maine. It's now known as the Key West Museum of Art and History. What I love about the building, besides the great exhibits they have there, is the fact that they built it with a really high-pitched roof line on top. They did it that way because they wanted to prevent the buildup of snow on top of the building. And as federal things go, it's actually worked out pretty well. I don't think we've ever had too much snow up on top of that building. Over to the left here is another federal contribution to the island. This is called Clinton Square. Leave it to the feds to build a square with 3 sides. The monument there in the middle, that's dedicated to the 167 Union soldiers who lost their lives here during the Civil War. Now, those guys didn't die from guns, bombs, or bullets. They actually died from yellow fever. Now, if you look to the right as I go around the corner here, look up these brick steps here behind the 2 large cannons. That is Mel Fisher's Maritime Museum. In 1622, 2 Spanish galleons, the Atocha and the Santa Margarita, they sank during the hurricane about 30 miles west of here. Well, in 1985, Mel Fisher and his crew uncovered the absolute motherlode of treasure. So far, they've brought up over $400 million
should be coming
worth
up
of
on
gold,
the right, I believe.
silver, emeralds, rubies, diamonds, artifacts of all kinds. A lot of that booty is on display in there. They'll even let you pick up and hold one of those gold bars that they found. But before you leave the museum, they will pry your fingers off of it, I promise you. It's not a souvenir. On the right-hand side, some large green wrought iron gates called the Presidential Gates. Opened most often over the years for Harry S. Truman. His little White House museum is right down the street there. And those gates were opened most recently for Bill and Hillary Clinton. They came here for a few days, stayed down there at the little White House, and the rumor on the island is that Bill and Hillary actually stayed in the same room. Let's hear it for the president. Now look to the left of the train. You're going to see a very unusual tree called a banyan tree. Member of the ficus family of trees. These are native to India. They spread horizontally like that as long as they have room. The largest one of those trees in the world, though, is located in Maui, Hawaii. And that tree in Maui covers 4 acres of property. I see a lot of heads shaking up and down. Yep, a lot of people have seen that tree. Now as I go through the next intersection, if you look over to the far right behind the parking lot, you're going to see a brick structure designed to resemble one of our Civil War era forts. It's actually our post office. It was designed and built in 1985 by a local architect named Sonny McCoy. Sonny became famous here on the island not for architecture, but for a little stunt he pulled in the 1980s when he got up one day and decided he wanted to go to Havana, Cuba on water skis. The man actually did it. He water skied on one ski all the way from Key West to Havana, Cuba. It only took him 6 hours and 10 minutes to make that trip. Now to this day, he's never told anybody why he couldn't make that trip. It was just some kind of a publicity stunt. As I turn to my left, if you look at the far right corner, you'll see a sign over there that says Begin US 1, Mile 0, right here. That's the beginning of US Highway number 1. It runs north 2,209 miles all the way up to Fort Kent, Maine. That is the longest contiguous highway in the United States, and we are going to go
right there,
all the way to the end of that highway today on this train. You'll see. Look to my right, house number 410 right here with the lavender shutters. This was the home of Francisco Marrero. Senor Marrero, he was a prisoner down in Havana, Cuba, in a jail down there. He bribed his way out of jail, made his way to Key West, founded a cigar factory here on the island, and became very wealthy in that business. Now, he built the mansion that you see there to entice a young lady named Enriqueta to move here from Europe and marry him. She did. They had 8 lovely children, and life was just grand. And then Mr. Marrero passed away. When he died, he left Enriqueta that house. He left her the business, and he left her the fortune, but he also left her something else to deal with. That was his first wife. He was married in Havana, Cuba. Now, he had to leave the island in kind of a hurry, so he never got around to getting that divorce. Well, the first wife heard about the fortune. She made a beeline here to Key West to prove she was the legal wife. And she took Enriqueta out onto the street, homeless and penniless. They say Enriqueta's ghost still wanders through the halls of that mansion to this very day, trying to recover the home and the fortune that she lost. And we do have a lot of ghost stories here because we are the largest historic preservation district in the continental United States. We have over 3,000 historic structures here on the island, and over 10% of those are on the National Register of Historic Places. We also have the largest collection of 19th century architecture anywhere in the world right here on our little island. A good example of that is through the intersection on the right-hand side over here. The aqua-colored building over there known as the Marquesa Inn and Cafe Marquesa. Look just to the left of the front doors as we go by, and you're going to see a little brass plaque about the size of a box of cigars over there that designates that that building is on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, originally that building was built as a grocery store, and then later on it was used as our first pharmacy here on the island. The first residential house attached to Marquesa, house number 612, and then 2 doors down from it, house number 618. These are both examples of classic New England revival style architecture. In that style of architecture, you've got a porch downstairs, a porch upstairs, and all the windows and doors line up symmetrically. This gray house here with the lavender shutters, that's classic New England revival also. Well, we took that style of architecture, played with it a little bit, and came up with what's called Bahamian or Conch style architecture. Over here to my left, this building right here on the corner, is an example of that. You'll notice you've got a porch that wraps around the end of the building. You have higher windows, ceilings, and doors in that style of architecture to help keep the buildings cool. These next 2 houses here on my left, now these 2 homes were originally built as identical homes for one man, Captain L.E. Pierce. Pierce built 2 identical homes because he had 2 daughters. He didn't want them to fight over who got the nicer home. They wound up fighting over who got the corner house instead. On my right, the pink building there, that is the Monroe County Public Library System. It's the oldest public library system in South Florida. The system itself dates back to 1892. They built that building in 1959 and then added this beautiful palm garden in about 1997. Now the next type of architecture I want to show you is called zigzag architecture. It's going to be coming up after we cross this little side street. It'll be the second house on your left. And what I want to make sure you look at is the roof line as we go by. Not this house with the green shutters, but the next one. Look at the roof as we go by. You'll notice that it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, here's what would happen. Young couples would meet each other. They'd fall in love. They'd get married. They'd build the first section of that house. Then as they would zig and zag, the family would grow. They'd add section after section as they needed them. The valleys between the sections were great for catching rainwater, for drinking water. We didn't get running water on this island for many, many years. Each family had to provide their own source of drinking water. Now, I want you to meet my girlfriend while we're on this tour today. If you look out this way and look all the way up at the top of this yellow building with the green trim, there she is, there's darling. All she ever does is hang out on top of that building. We're doing the Victoria's Secret shoot today, darling, in case you're interested. That building there, that was a sponge warehouse. They found natural sponges in our waters here in about 1850. It became a big business. Our local boys would go out on the water in their little wooden boats. They had these long wooden poles, had a couple of hooks on the end of them. They'd reach down, pluck up the sponges one at a time. It was a slow, tedious process, but they were supplying 95% of the nation's sponges that way. Well, around 1900, these Greek diver guys showed up there. Now, those guys, they had the suits, you know, with the big helmets and the boots. They could walk around on the bottom and gather up the sponges by the armload. Our local boys, they didn't think that was especially fair, so if they met each other at night in the bars and saloons, some of that two-fisted conversation would apparently take place. And finally, the Greek guys left the area. Life returned to normal until 1938. That's when a red tide struck this area and destroyed all of our sponge beds. We'd lost an industry, and what you'll learn today on this tour is that we do lose a lot of industries here on this island. Coming up on the left side of the train, on the very corner, there's a white house with black trim, and this was the home of Thomas Thompson, Mr. Thompson's son, Norbert Thompson, built the Western Union schooner. That's considered the flagship of Key West. But as we go by this house, look around the side here, and you'll see a beautiful porch on the side there. They've done a gorgeous job of restoration on that home. On the right side of the train, right where this little gravel driveway is, right to my right there, look at that tree on the side of it, the reddish one with the flaky looking bark. That's called a gumbo limbo tree, but locals refer to it as a tourist tree because of all of that red peeling skin. Oh. Over to my left, another member of the ficus family of trees, a rubber tree. This one's so big, it's even got its own mailbox right there by the boat. And some of you know the answer to this question. What would Frank Sinatra say if he walked by there? Whoops, there goes another rubber tree plant. Kerplop, kerplop. That was the sound of that show. Okay, on my left side here is a yellow building. Look at the tree up against that giant palm tree. Looks like a fan. It's actually called a traveler's palm. Early travelers knew if they found one of those trees, they could get a drink of water because rainwater collects in between the palm fronds. Hence the name Traveler's Palm. This area to my left, this has been military property since 1833. It's called Perry Court. It's home to our Coast Guard members and their families today. It used to be an Army base. We've always had a lot of military on the island. We've had Army, we've had Air Force, we've had Marines. But you know what we are, guys? A Navy town. Sing along. Back there at about this time, and I see at least one guy with his fingers in his ears. That would be a Marine. Marines aren't real crazy about that song for some reason. Navy fight song, Marine, something going on there. Over here to the left, you're going to see an open area behind this next white picket fence. It is actually a military cemetery. Now there's only one marker right in the very middle, and the reason is they came in here in the 1920s and pulled all the graves out and took them up to Pensacola, Florida to a larger cemetery. Well, in 1991, they were doing some work in there. It turns out they missed a couple of graves. It was rededicated as a military cemetery. The marker was placed there, and it's going to remain that way from now on. This area is Old Town Key West. Most of the homes you're going to see in here today were built in the 1850s, 1860s era. They were built by ship's carpenters, not architects. They used a technique called mortise and tenon joints to hold the houses together along with the nails, but that allows the houses to have a little bit of sway and give in the sometimes hurricane force winds that we occasionally get here on the island. Now we're going to take a trip through this neighborhood to my left. It's called the Meadows, beautiful little neighborhood. And note too what the houses are alike. They all have one thing in common. Now we're going to play see if you can guess what they have in common. Get ready and go. Any guesses yet? I don't hear it. What do they have in common? Good guess. But you don't get any points because you didn't form it as a question. Yeah, the roofs is what they have in common. We had a terrible fire here in 1886, but before I tell you about that, one of the reasons for the roofs, I got a little ahead of myself there. One of the reasons for the metal roofs was collection of rainwater. We didn't get running water until 1942. That's when the Navy built a pipeline here from the mainland. But the major reason for the metal roofs was the fire we had in 1886. That fire destroyed over half the buildings on the island. Our local family sat offshore watching while their city burned. And what they noticed was the flames were spreading by leaping roof to roof to roof on the buildings with wooden shingles in those days. So when they came back and started to rebuild, a law was passed mandating the use of the metal roofs that you see here today. Now we always have something blooming here on the island. There's a lot of tropical vegetation here. I want to ask you another Jeopardy question. What color are the flowers on a bougainvillea? Anybody know?